This video is all about learning how to finish outdoor furniture. We'll be using the Adirondack chairs that we built in the last video as the template, as the example on how to finish outdoor furniture. So I'll put a link to that video in the description below if you want to go check that out and learn how to build these chairs. The most important notes before we get started is that this wood is untreated wood, so we're going to be talking about how to finish untreated wood projects for outdoor use. We all know the biggest enemy to outdoor furniture is, of course, the elements. We can do nothing about that, and they're going to win every time when our furniture is exposed to elements. So what I'm going to show you in this video will give you more than likely 2 good years of service out of anything you put outside, but you're going to have to maintain it just like you would have to maintain a deck, just like you would have to maintain any sort of wood furniture that you have out there that's painted, anything like that. It's still going to require maintenance every 2 or 3 years. So the first step in this project was to actually fill up the holes that I had used for the screws. I did not want to have those screw holes visible, one, just for aesthetic reasons, but the second reason for that is that when you have holes like that in your wood, it actually gives a place for water to collect, and that can damage your wood. And if you are in an area that has freeze-thaw cycles, the expansion and contraction from freezing water can also split your wood. So after the wood filler has had enough time to dry, I went back with a sander and I actually touched up those spots with a 220 grit sandpaper just to smooth out that finish and that surface. I'm not going to show you my sanding process. I've shown you that in past videos, and you probably remember that I hate sanding, so there's not a lot to see there, not a lot of excitement. But after everything's been sanded down, I then took the chair outside and wiped off all of that extra sawdust from the sanding process, just to make sure that the finishes that I apply to the chair have a great surface to adhere to. And another important note is that when you're going to stain or paint, you want to make sure that your wood surfaces are ready to accept those materials. And oftentimes, if the wood's very smooth, you do need to hit it with some level of sandpaper, 80 grit, 220 grit, which is really fine even, to try to give some surfaces for that paint or stain to be able to adhere to. I always pre-stain my projects before I stain them, so just follow the directions on the can to do that. The one project that I did not pre-stain, I really regretted it. And I'm going to make a video in the future showing what wood looks like if you pre-stain versus if you just jump straight to the stain and apply that to the surface. So just make a note, mental note up here, that you really want to look into pre-staining your wood before you stain it. Follow the directions on the can, and note that the directions on the can require you to start staining within 2 hours after you've applied that pre-stain and wiped off the excess. So just keep that in mind. When you start using pre-stain, you have a very limited window to apply the stain for that pre-stain to be effective. And as another reminder, I do use Minwax products for all of my staining. I'm not sponsored by them, it's just what I've always used. I've always had good success with the Minwax brand products, and that's why I'm using these products. Once again, it's not because I'm sponsored. So after I've pre-stained, I then move on to use my stain. This is a dark walnut stain. It's an oil-based stain for Minwax, and it's one that I've used in the past, so I'm familiar with the color that I'm going to get from this stain. What I would caution you with is if you're using a new stain, if you're not sure that you're going to like the color, always test that on a hidden portion of your item before you proceed with it, because stain, once again, becomes a part of the wood. It's not like paint where it is just on the surface. When you stain something, it's actually part of that wood, and if you want to go back, it is very difficult, short of sanding down a ton of wood, to get that stain out, or putting something like paint over it to cover it up. So make sure before you really get into a project that you're happy with the color of that stain before you proceed. I wipe the stain on. You can tell I've got the Michael Jackson gloved hand going on. And the first part of this video, I became frustrated with the glove. I took the glove off and just used my bare hand, and my hand became very sticky from that stain. So just know going into this, you want to make sure that you have some cheap disposable rubber gloves to be able to apply the stain. But you brush the stain on, you give it some time to soak in, not very long though, maybe at most 5 minutes, and then you go back and you wipe off the extra stain, the excess stain that did not absorb into the wood, in order for it not to set up on the wood and give it kind of a sticky film. So really you just want to make sure that you're wiping off that extra stain so that your final product turns out well. So after I did this, I went ahead and flipped the chair over and did the bottom as well, just to make sure that all my surfaces were covered. just working in small sections and taking my time getting it done. I will make a note that I was very careful to make sure that my stain, when it dripped through, because it will do that. Gravity is a thing and it will get you every time, but that gravity pulls that stain down, and if you have extra stain, it'll actually come out on the other side of the chair. So I did flip my chair back over and just go back and touch up certain areas to make sure that I wouldn't have any sort of lines or streaks where I had extra stain. So once again, you can do this with a cloth to rub it in. You can do this with a brush to get in really tight areas. You really have a lot of options when it comes to applying stain on how you can get it on your item. You just want to make sure that you're getting that extra stain off. So I have a chair that's been stained and a chair that's not been stained yet side by side, so you can see the comparison there. Really like the look of that dark walnut stain, so very happy with how that turned out. I will make it also a note of saying that this next step is very important. So you want to make sure the chairs have time to set, but what really protects your wood from the elements is going to be the finish, the protective coating that you put on top of it. So in outdoor projects in the past, I have used different things like Minwax polyacrylic that's water-based. I've also used polyurethane, just the regular polyurethane. And those products are fine, but they do not withstand the elements very well. So if you're going to be doing anything that's outside, the biggest tip I can give you is go with Helmsman Spar polyurethane. It's the bee's knees. It is great. And I've used it on my front door. I've used it on these chairs. And yes, you do have to reapply it from time to time. We're talking 2-3 year time frame, just because the sun beats down on it. The elements beat down on it and wears it down, and you've got to apply some extra coats. But this has just very good resistance. It withstands the elements very well, unlike some of those other products that are meant for indoor applications. So I started using the Minwax that I had, the Minwax Helmsman Spar polyurethane, on the bottom first, so that just like with the stain, I could flip the chair over and make sure that I didn't have any streaks or any extra that had bled through to the other side. I then started to put the coat on the top of the chair just to make sure that it had protection. Really, the top of the chair and any sort of surface that could possibly retain water, a surface that's flat or has an indentation. You really want to make sure that you're paying special attention to those, because the water is your enemy too. The sun and the water, they get you every time. So just make sure that you're putting good coats on there. I did do 2 coats on all of the top surfaces, and I only did 1 coat on the surfaces that would not be directly exposed to the sun and the water to protect the wood. But really I wanted to pay special attention to those surfaces that would see wear and tear from use, but also wear and tear from the sun and from the rain. So this is what the chairs look like after they've been finished. They're out in the wonderful great wide yard at this point, and we have sat in them and have enjoyed them thoroughly. So if you like what you've seen here, subscribe, like, comment, do the works, and go out and finish a wood project for yourself for the great outdoors. You'll be thankful that you did, and it's something that you can do to make sure that you're keeping your projects that you've spent all this time and effort on making in the first place safe as they're exposed to the elements.